So, okay, the audio is on the stream. This is for the people that have tuned in early. Everybody's here. We're getting ready for the show. And you get a little treat for 40 seconds. You guys can say hello to the audience, and then I'll shut you up.
Well, glad you're here. Welcome.
Hey, hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for coming, listening.
20 seconds to go. Everybody tense up. Okay, I'm going to fade you guys out for now. Take care of my business. And it's time to do the show. Oh, wait, I don't even want my own name there. Hey, it's the Triangle Talk Show. We are officially on the air for us. Probably going to be our biggest show ever. Here we go. From the studio, in the bonus room, above the garage, on the north side of Cary, sequestered at the foot of Mount Belzoni, this is the Triangle Talk Show. I'm Gary Pierce, and I'm supposed to say something else. Oh, this is... I'm going to learn how to do this one day. This is episode 96. It's June 9th, 2020. And the title of the show is the Stop RDU Quarry. Now, a lot of the times when I do this show, I make the show title a little bit cryptic. This one is not cryptic. It should be clear enough. I was going to title the show More Umstead or Big Hole in the Ground. But I went with this. Triangle Talk Show is a YouTube show and a podcast for the Triangle area. We try to aim at things more or less of interest to you triangularians. Sometimes we're local. Sometimes we get a little bit broader. Today's show is very local. Literally up the road from me about a mile. So I guess it's somewhere near the summit of Mount Belzoni. We are unfair and unbalanced on the left side of politics. When we get political, I'm not sure we're going to call this political tonight. It's more environmental, I guess. We do a live show at 4 p.m. on Sundays most of the time. And once in a while we pop up with one of these special midweek shows because we just need to. Need to this time. Our website is triangletalkshow.com. Our Facebook group is Triangle Talk Show. There's a pattern there, which is broken when we get to Twitter because it's at Talk Triangle. And on YouTube, the address is still gibberish until we get to 100 subscribers. And that could happen tonight. Everybody out there who's watching this show on YouTube, click the subscribe button. Push us over 100, then we can get our custom URL that says Triangle Talk Show, and then you can go away. I don't care if you pay attention anymore. Podcast-wise, we're on just about every podcast app there is, along with TuneIn and Spotify. And now I'm going to introduce our guests, fading your audio up. These are folks from the Umstead Coalition and Triangle Off-Road Cyclists, and first in the upper left, for those of you that are watching, is Dr. Gene Spooner, chair of the Umstead Coalition. Gene, welcome to the Triangle Talk Show.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having us.
And to your right, at least the way it's appearing on my screens, is Gil Johnson, a Umstead Coalition board member. Gil, good to have you here.
Thanks very much.
In the lower left, Liz Adams, Liz is the scientist here, a research associate at the UNC Institute for the Environment. You're lending credibility.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, actually, with Dr. Gene Spooner, we've got a lot of credibility. I don't know what your problem is, Gil. You know. And finally, in the lower right-hand corner is David Anderson. David is representing Triangle Off-Road Cyclists. David, thank you for coming to the show.
Hey, Gary, thanks for having us, and thanks everybody for joining in on this important local issue. Before we get into the issue we're going to be talking about, which is that RDU Quarry thing, I mean, we're in remarkable times. All kinds of things are going on out there, and I just want to see how you guys are doing out there in COVID land. Everybody healthy?
Doing great.
Yeah. Yep. So far, so good.
All right.
Parks are very popular now.
Yes.
Yeah, Umstead is back open again?
It is, and it's very popular, as it should be.
Okay. So right now I'm going to do a Rachel Maddow kind of thing, and I'm going to do a somewhat limited description of what this show is going to be all about. And I'm going to give this a try, and then we'll actually get into the details. So we'll see how well I can do that. So we've got Umstead Park on the western edge of Wake County. Everybody knows what that is. Just south, kind of southwest of the side of the park, hard up against the edge of the park in Interstate 40, we've got a massive quarry that if you're driving down Interstate 40 is kind of out of sight. You really don't see it. You just see a stand of trees. If you get off on Harrison Avenue, you'll probably encounter a couple of big dump trucks rolling back and forth. Just west of the quarry, kind of northwest of the quarry, a little bit west of the Harrison Avenue entrance to Umstead, there is public land. And just how much of that and who owns it and who manages it, we're going to get into that in a little bit. Today, it is all forest. It's not quite untouched. Old Reedy Creek Road runs through that territory to the southwest entrance to Umstead. There are some bike trails there, maybe unauthorized, I guess. Somehow there is one private residence. I don't know how that happened. Wake Stone, the company that owns the quarry, wants to dig another quarry on that public land, just west of their current quarry. RDU Airport and the Airport Authority is involved in this somehow. You may have heard about them wanting to put up some big ugly fences along Reedy Creek Road to keep those pesky cyclists off the land. The Umstead Coalition and allies like the Triangle Off-Road Cyclists have some better ideas for using that land. They filed suit to stop the quarry, so it's tied up in court. There's going to be a public hearing, a virtual public hearing on June 23rd. That's a Tuesday at 6 p.m. It's going to be a long one, and you can sign up for that public hearing to speak, or you can just observe online. And the timing for this show is somewhat based on that public hearing because we want you to know all about it and maybe get ready to sign up and participate again. So that's why we're doing the show now. And we picked a good time to do this show because, there's really nothing else going on out there. So once again, the hearing is June 23rd, 6 p.m. It's going to be a WebEx conference. And you can register for that by noon on that day on June 23rd. And we'll put some links in the show notes on the Triangle Talk Show webpage. They're all over the webpage for the Umstead Coalition. The proceedings will remain open after that hearing, after that online meeting, for another 10 days. So if you want to watch that and then make more comments, you can file more comments. So I think I've set the stage, but before we really dig in, we probably ought to know a little bit more about what the Umstead Coalition and the Triangle Off-Road Cyclists are all about. And by the way, you guys have done a great job of publicizing the show. Probably have an audience in the millions right now. However, it's mostly your audience. We may be preaching mostly to the choir. I don't know, but this is a talk show due diligence kind of thing. So, Dr. Jean, tell us a little bit about the Umstead Coalition. What you guys are up to?
Great, thank you. So the Umstead Coalition is only about 52 years young. We were formed by the late Margaret Nygaard, who was also the founder of Eno River State Park and Eno River Association. And over these last 50 plus years, we have saved Umstead State Park from the loss of over 1,000 acres for a proposed runway that wasn't built, saved a runway perpendicular to the current runway system, which was not built, which is how we got the Oddfellows track in our public domain today. We've stopped a dry dam from taking over part of Umstead State Park at Turkey Creek and Ebenezer Church Road. We successfully stopped and highway, a major highway through Umstead State Park in the 80s and 90s. And all of which we've done by finding positive alternatives and a win for the community that's greater for the community and Umstead State Park. But what we really love to do is to work on service projects. We've restored and in the middle of bringing back to life a mess hall, Sycamore Mess Hall, which will be open for day use. We'd love to get back on that activity on Sycamore Lake in the park and several other service projects. The park itself is much older than the Umstead Coalition. It was formed in 1934. And I must add at this point that the Umstead State Park is older than the RDU International Airport, which was formed when the park was formed. There was an airport when the park came in, and it was in South Raleigh. So we're older, and we're proud to be one of the biggest state parks in the state of North Carolina.
And just to be clear, you are not Umstead State Park.
That's right. Thank you for clarifying that. So we're the Friends Group. We're all volunteers, and we protect and serve William B. Umstead State Park, and we are not employees of the state.
Okay, so now we know Umstead Coalition. Let's go to David and tell me a little bit about the Triangle Off-Road Cyclists.
Hi, Gary. Yeah, TORC, T-O-R-C. We're a Triangle Off-Road Cyclists. We're a volunteer-run, nonprofit group dedicated to ensuring the future of mountain biking in the Triangle area through the promotion of responsible riding, building and maintenance of mountain biking trails, and preservation of our natural resources. We were founded in 2005. We help maintain 16 area trails. And we're a chapter of the International Mountain Bicycling Association. We have about over 5,000 members active in our meetup, our group on meetup.org. And we typically organize several hundred, I believe it was almost 300 events last year. Everything ranging from beginner and advanced rides, kids rides, women's rides, skills clinics, races, and our annual Torque Fest. And we are an all-volunteer-run organization. And if you'd like to get more involved and help us build and maintain trail, you can find us at TORC, TORC-NC.org.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right now, Umstead itself is not, it's not bike unfriendly, but there's not really much opportunity to do off-road riding in Umstead. It's all pretty much on some big gravel roads, not really super fun off-road riding. So what's the interest in Umstead right now for you guys?
Well, our members use Umstead State Park heavily, not only for mountain biking, but also hiking. A lot of our members enjoy both sports and trail running. The park historically has, you're correct, they're what they call multi-use trails, which are, you can think of them as gravel roads, similar to forest roads in the national forest. And while they are a fun experience in nature, it's not as secluded and as remote of an experience as a dirt single track trail, which is what dominates the sport and the activity of mountain biking. There is single track mountain biking in the nearby Lake Crabtree County Park. That's the most popular park in the Wake County system, and those trails are immensely popular. And one of our hopes is to, our hope here is to help the park not only expand, but to expand single track mountain biking in this area. It's at the nexus of the Triangle Greenway system, that corridor that goes between the Black Creek Greenway and Lake Crabtree County Park and into Umstead State Park. When you look at the metrics of Greenway usage, it's right in the top 2-3 Greenway corridors in the entire triangle. It's it just makes sense as the hub of the Greenway system to expand and build some single track trail in the park.
Yeah, I look forward to that. All right. Before we begin in more in-depth discussion of what's going on, Umstead Coalition has already produced a video which kind of gets us started in that direction. It's about 3 minutes long, and we are going to take a look at that, and that will probably lead us into a broader discussion of what's going on with this quarry. So let's, if I can push all the right buttons here, let's take a look.
The Umstead Recreation District is the most popular outdoor forested recreation area in the Triangle. This is a prized asset that defines our region. Decades of strategic planning and tens of millions of dollars in investments have aligned to create this amazing Greenway system connecting Raleigh, Cary, Morrisville, and Durham to Umstead State Park. And the investments have paid off. Employees and businesses benefit from our renowned quality of life and forested green space. The intensity of these lines indicates usage levels. This corridor is one of the most used Greenway corridors in the Triangle, and it's part of the East Coast Greenway Trail System. Lake Crabtree is the most visited Wake County park, and Umstead State Park saw 1.8 million visitor days per year, which is up 35% from the previous year. But many are surprised when they learn that the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority and Wake Stone plan to quarry this land, which is known as the Oddfellows Tract. It borders Umstead State Park, the East Coast Greenway, and Crabtree Creek. If this lease is allowed, here's what we'll see and hear for the next 25 years. How do we keep this from happening? First, there's a lawsuit. Local groups Torque and Umstead Coalition have filed a lawsuit. Here's what it's based on. The Oddfellows Tract is public land that's jointly owned by these four. And these four are also the ones that appoint and manage the membership of the RDU Airport Authority. Yet, this lease was signed without the approval and consent of these four. And according to NC General statutes, that is not legal. There are numerous environmental concerns, including recent photos like this one, indicating that Wake Stone has been allowing runoff from their operations directly into the waters of Umstead State Park and Crabtree Creek. Also, this is the home of the Dunn family, and this new quarry would be located within feet of their home. This proposed quarry is bad for all of us. There's a better alternative. The Conservation Fund and North Carolina State Parks want to buy the Oddfellows Tract, preserving it for all of us to enjoy as an addition to Umstead Park. In fact, over 18,000 petition signers and a growing list of local businesses support preserving this land. Do we quarry this land, destroying it forever and damaging the tranquility of the nearby parks? Or do we preserve it as part of Umstead State Park and support the recreational demands of Triangle residents?
Well, I don't think we're totally done. I think that there's a lot of good information in there, but we have some other things to talk about, I think.
Hey, you got the 3-minute blurb. What else is there, right?
Yeah, I'm doing the television producer thing here, bumping things around. Maybe one of the biggest things I get from that is the idea that this quarry, which is currently, the current quarry is on private land. They own it. They want to put a quarry on public land. Is that the big complaint?
Yes, it's public use land that was set aside or purchased for a runway that was never built. And so there's certain rules that the state municipal agencies should follow when they're trying to dispose of that type of land, and they haven't followed those rules.
Okay, and I think I caught you saying that earlier that there was going to be a runway going southeast from RDU, and this was the territory that runway was going to be on, and Umstead Coalition was part of the group that stopped it. Am I remembering that right?
That's correct. So there was a proposal to put a perpendicular runway instead of a parallel runway, which is not very efficient for a runway system. And the oppositions were Umstead Coalition and also the Research Triangle Park and those businesses. And finally, the public came together, and the solution was the runway we have now to the west, which ended up to be a far better runway system for the community and for our airport.
Okay, I'm digging up a Google Maps here.
Gary, I might add that this would be the first private rock mine on public property in North Carolina and next to a state park. And we feel that that's a precedent that should not be allowed in the state of North Carolina. And this is public land belonged to by us.
So this issue has been going on for a while. I paid attention to it as much as I see a story in the paper, see a story on TV, and I pay attention to it, but I haven't been following it minute by minute the way you guys have. What's the status of the lawsuit, and what was the background on that, and where does it stand now?
The lawsuit is in appeal. We have an injunction against the quarry, and briefs are being filed back and forth. And we anticipate sometime later this fall of the appellate court to be hearing the grievances from both sides.
And the premise of the lawsuit is that the actual deeded owners of this land, Wake County, City of Raleigh, Durham County, and the City of Durham, that it's their decision, that it's not, that the airport authority alone does not have the adequate authority to destroy this land with a mining, by issuing the mining permit, and that's basically the premise of the suit.
That's right, and the suit is different than the permit that's currently being asked for. It's a different process. The lawsuit is against the process of the mineral lease being signed, we think illegally, and the mining permit, which is the June 23 meeting, has to do with DEQ mining, giving a permit for a new rock mine or not. So they're on two independent tracks.
Is the lawsuit going slower than you thought it would, or is it a pretty typical lawsuit?
I think it's typical. There's a little delay because of COVID in the courts, but I don't think it's slower than anticipated.
All right. So let me see. I'll sort of recap and see if I'm getting the right understanding. The agency that was negotiating with Wake Stone and was about to permit them to do something was the airport authority?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. And the airport authority doesn't own the land?
That is correct. The land is not owned by the airport. It's owned by the 4 local governments, the City of Raleigh, the City of Durham, County of Wake, and the County of Durham.
And so how does the airport authority think they can get away with leasing land they don't own?
Who wants this one?
That's a good one. Yeah, go ahead, Gil.
Well, in order to sell the property, which for a while there they claimed that they were prevented by the FAA from selling surplus property. When we finally got them to admit that that's not the case, they changed it to say, well, it's just our policy. To sell the property, they would have to get the concurrence of the 4 local governments in order to do that. The mineral lease, I think, was a way to avoid that. They typically do leases all the time for the rental car places, airport concessionaires, but they're always related to operation of the airport. This rock quarry has really no relationship to their core mission at all. They've talked about the need for funding for the many projects that they've got, the genuine needs that they do have, but this is not the way to really get the money that they're after. They've turned down an offer to purchase that would give them some immediate cash on hand. They've really stuck to their guns on this push for a quarry. There are some influential and powerful interests behind this because there is a lot of opposition to it, but just can't seem to gain traction with some of these folks.
Okay,
Now, we believe the mineral lease is not really a lease, it's a sale, because you have 500 trucks a day leaving the site with overburden or rock, and all of that material, the trees, the logging, the overburden, which is the soil above the rock, and the rock is being sold off, removed from the property, our public property, and sold off site by a private company making that income. The airport is going to get, as Gil said, gets woefully little money. It gets, after they get started, they only get $100,000 a year for the first 5 years, $200 a year from the quarry for years 6 through 10. Contrast that to us offering an immediate $6.46 million. Contrast that to, yes.
There you go.
Yes, I'll glad to come back to that, or someone can. And contrast that to, they just signed a lease, it's called a pouring rights, so that if you go to the airport now, you buy Pepsi, you don't buy a Coca-Cola product. And that gives the airport almost $1 million a year. And we're certainly not destroying the land by drinking Pepsi products at the airport. And we also believe that the proposed quarry on our public property by a private company is not in airport purposes, which is also therefore out of the mission that the legislature gave the airport authority when managing the land owned by the 4 local governments. So the red line is the royalty, the minimum royalties guaranteed that I mentioned. And the green line, without even any kind of inflation or anything, is the money we've offered right off the top. So the top line there is the mineral rights if they produce maximum. Last I saw, we were in a little bit of a recession here, so that's a little skeptical, but let's just say so. Still, it takes 15 years for the quarry royalties to catch up. That does not pay for any infrastructure for the airport. So we believe we are a better deal, net present value-wise, for the airport. And more importantly, or just as importantly, or not alternatively importantly, is that this is really bad PR for the airport. Here they're trying to destroy a very popular recreation corridor, which we should get back and talk about how popular it is, for a very dinky amount of money for the airport.
Yeah, the money's very backloaded and it's high risk, right? The minimum provision within the contract, within the lease, as you can see, is it makes no sense, when you compare it to an immediate the conservation fund cash offer. But beyond that, this doesn't take into account any of the externalities, which are huge. I mean, the probably the largest of which is, now the true owners of land, the counties and cities, have a giant liability on their hands. What are you going to do with that pit when this is done? And what's going to happen if any of those walls ever do give in, of the Lake Crabtree Creek suspended between 2 400-foot deep, deep pits? I mean, it makes no sense when you zoom out and look at it from what makes sense for the region, purely just with the financial economics of the risk, not even to mention any other externalities of health and quality of life and damage to the park.
And that 100% target there that the airport continues to tout, that's based upon the rate of recent growth and that continuing uninterrupted for the next 25 years. So that's just very unlikely that that would ever be achieved. I mean, we're in a recession now.
Right, and then the Wake County Commissioners commissioned a study with the UNC School of Government, and that study determined that the alternative incomes for the airport, whether or not they take the conservation fund up in the alternative streams for having a recreational theme and additional village concepts would net the airport a minimum of $200 million. And so the quarry is offering pittance, except for they're going to turn over a huge liability and a lost economic opportunity for the airport and the community.
I want to just emphasize one thing that Gene threw in there with a lot of other good stuff. But one way I think you really need to look at this is it's so off mission for the airport. It's a huge risk to their owners. It's a huge risk to their constituents, and damaging to their constituents, and being a bad neighbor, quite frankly, to the park. But as you could see in that chart, I mean, the quarry agreement is very back end loaded, and it's paid over time. When you look at that cash flow, it's the contract that the lease agreement would provide. It pales in comparison to what they can do just with on mission vendor agreements, right? With pouring rights that they sign, with a new brew pub microbrewery style entertainment and restaurant in one of the terminals. It's something that doesn't really substantially move the needle, but at huge risk and a huge PR issue, quite frankly, for not only the airport, but for us as a region when we're, trying to continue to attract a great workforce and great companies. It looks like we don't have our act together.
So one of the things I've seen people mention on Facebook when they're talking about this is, well, the area is growing and it needs the material that would come out of this quarry. Does it? Well,
we do need aggregate, but and when this quarry opened back in '81, the area looked quite a bit different. Cary was in a growth phase. There was a lot of development activity. Now, much of that has been developed out, and during that time, other quarries have expanded nearby. The one that's actually closest to the airport is the Martin Marietta Quarry on Westgate Road that recently expanded. So we've got lots of capacity out there to meet aggregate needs. And the other argument I've heard mentioned a lot is costs of trucking and how that affects development costs. But that's a small portion of that trucking aggregate in terms of developments. So that just we don't really, there's not an economic need for that here in the area now.
Right, and these quarries that exist now were not there in 1980, 81. So what we believe is that the aggregate needs of the market are met by other quarries and do not need this new quarry pit. So we're not talking about having to put another pit somewhere else. We don't believe this one is needed at all.
And keep in mind that the current quarry is still operational, and they've got, depending on who you ask, they've probably got 5 or more years of operation just from their existing quarry pit.
What happens to that quarry pit once it is exhausted in terms of valuable material they can take out of it?
Well, the state of North Carolina State Park System has an option on the existing quarry pit and a little bit of area around it, as well as a path connection to Umstead State Park, for that to become public land. So it's an option that we have, and it's tied to something called the Sunset Clause, which we thought we had, which we think we should have back. And then the rest of that land is zoned industrial. unfortunately, because it's at the entrance of Umstead State Park. But it's private land, so the quarry company can develop it as a business park or something like that.
But most of it's
of course, it's on the land acquisition for Umstead State Park, so that would be our preference. Most
of it's a big hole. Is there? I mean, what fills up with water, or you don't fill it up with any dirt again and make level land out of it.
So I don't believe it would fill up with water very fast. It would take about 100+ years to fill up with rainwater. So and it would probably fill only within about 100 feet of the top of pit bank, because that particular side, those top of banks are higher than Crabtree Creek by about 100 to 125 feet. So I don't think it would. And the town of Cary commissioned C.H. Toom Hill to do 2 studies and determined that it cannot be a water reservoir, it cannot be a drinking water reservoir, it cannot be used for reuse, and it can't be used for sewage or reclaimed water. And of course, it can't be a landfill, because those quarries that have been attempted to be used landfills are now called Superfund sites in the country. So we don't want that here. So it doesn't really have very much of an afterlife. We believe that the colored watercolors that Wakestone have put out there are fanciful and have no engineering basis, and they have not provided an engineering basis for those.
And that's a great point, Gene. I think, Gary, with I'm glad you're bringing up some of the counterpoints to this. And the airport has a large, really loud megaphone. Wakestone has a lot of connections and good at getting their message out there to those in influence in the triangle. I think what's important, I think the way we need to, the model we need to think about this, the lens you need to look at this through is, okay, if there are these pressing needs to have it, right? If we truly need the aggregate and otherwise it's a limiter on our growth, that is the limiting function of our growth in that area. If that's true, okay, let somebody put some math and engineering behind that and model it out and prove it. But no one's made the case beyond just the glib little, oh yeah, of course we need aggregate to grow. You wouldn't dare want to slow growth, would you? Well, tanking our quality of life also, that'll put a damper on growth. I mean, this can very much be argued from both sides of the economic development coin. I mean, I'll tell you the predominant employers in that region, they'd much rather have the recreation space than a quarry. It's such an asset to recruiting both businesses and employees. But I think also, when you hear the counterpoints, likewise, when you hear the counterpoints for, it'll have a beautiful afterlife and it'll be a great park, and look at all the green on blue on our watercolor diagram, or watercolor utopia here. It's, again, it doesn't pass the sniff test, right? Okay, well, who's done some engineering? Who's done some modeling about what that would take? How much is that going to cost in 25 to 35 years? Who's going to pay for that? It just, I think it really deserves the dig a little deeper on all these counterpoints, and you quickly realize that,
so to speak.
Yeah. 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 Oh man.
Somebody's wish
Terrible
watercolor.
Pun. Sorry.
Yeah. Somebody's wish watercolor that does not even match their submitted designs of their current print. There's a mismatch all around.
Right. And let me mention too that property it has that real value now. At the end of the quarry operation, it's not going to have any value anymore. Quarries, unfortunately, are really magnets for disaster. Eno River State Park inherited a quarry that's much smaller than this one would be. It's like a tenth the size and just a fraction of the depth, and they have a lot of problems with that, even though it's off limits. The quarries have an afterlife that's not conducive to public health anyway.
No, they're vertical slopes, so it's extremely dangerous. I might add, on the collapse of the bank, it's likely even more of an issue potential on the Oddfellow side because of the topography is a little bit lower. And they now want to decrease the amount of buffers and potentially deforest all the buffers between the top of Quarry Pit and Crabtree Creek, and also between the top of Quarry Pit and Umstead State Park, to very, very small. And to speak to the stability of the stream bank, in 1992, the existing quarry had a blast that blew out the bank and literally blew debris and covered half of Crabtree Creek up. Crabtree Creek is a significant creek, as we all know. And they just got a slap on their hands and asked to kind of clean it up, which we also think is a problem in that system. They say, well, they haven't had a violation. I'd say that's a violation. But in the current mineral lease with RDU Airport Authority, if that goes through, the public is totally liable, and the Wakestone, if they do something really bad and blow out Crabtree Creek, the Wakestone can just leave, have no liability. They just leave the disaster behind. Or if they continue and they mine the pit till the end, vertical slopes, no fence around it to prevent any public access, because it's too unsafe. And then they walk and leave that total public liability to the four owning local governments. Not a good deal.
We have some questions coming in from the chat that's available on our Facebook group, the Triangle Talk Show Facebook group, and also on YouTube. And Caroline from Umstead Coalition is scraping those off and putting them in a window for me. So let's take a look at a couple of the questions. We're going to go back in our discussion a little bit. The buyout that is offered, and I'm not sure by whom, I guess by you guys, is it equal to or better than the rock quarry? I think you've explained that pretty well, that your buyout, and it's a lease offer, right? You're not buying the property. You are offering to take over the lease, or to have a lease on that property, as opposed to Wakestone. You'd actually buy it. You don't own the property. Okay. Because Wakestone isn't looking to own the property, right?
No, they don't.
No, of course not. That's the best of both worlds, right? Make a mess of somebody else's property and make money on it and walk away.
All right. So you're offering to actually buy it. And is your offer equal to or better than the rock quarry? And I think you pretty well explained that it's equal to or better than what you think is reasonable, a reasonable return from the rock quarry, and not their pie in the sky.
And that's equal to the appraised value of the property, and it will give them immediate cash on hand. They do have needs that need to be met, but the quarry deal it takes those over many years. And it won't meet any of their immediate needs. And
yeah, Gary, it's a purchase offer that, with the intention that it would become officially part of Umstead State Park.
So if you're
permanently protected,
if your fund were to buy it, then you would deed it back to the state as part of Umstead Park.
There's also.
Go ahead.
There's also a distinction, I think, in lease term length. Typically, a municipal corporation such as RDU Airport Authority would be required to treat leases differently depending on the length of the lease. And so this is for a 35-year lease. And I think if we looked at the statutes, the law says if it's a long-term lease over 10 years, that should be treated as a sale. So there's all kinds of kind of loopholes or, responsibilities. They have great authority. They have authority of eminent domain, but they're not following their responsibilities.
These things can get so complex. Another question about impact on bald eagle nesting at Lake Crabtree, and regulation preventing disturbance within a few miles of a bald eagle nest.
You want it, Liz, or you want me to take it?
You can go ahead.
So I'll make a start at it. So Wildlands Network is working with us, And in fact, Liz will get back. She'll tell you what's behind her wall in a second. We do have a bald eagle's nest over at Lake Crabtree County Park. We also have a nesting area for the great blue heron nearby, which is the nesting area for great blue heron is also protected. And we also have several other not endangered and protected, but species of note that are in the corridor, and some species like the bobcat, who cannot survive without a long range along a stream corridor like Crabtree Creek. So if the quarry and its fence went in, that would sever one of the remaining last corridors between the entire Piedmont of North Carolina and through Umstead State Park onto the coast. This is a very critical area. And the quarry is just kind of like washing this off to the side, kind of ignoring it. And it's not to be ignored. These particular, this is a connected wildlife corridor, which would be severed, never to be recovered again if this went through. And Liz, what's on your wall?
So this is the Eastern Wildlands Network of lands that basically connects Canada all the way through down to, I think, Florida. I can't see the map. I'm not looking at it right now, but I think the key point is, if anyone wants to learn more about this, is to go to the Wildlands Network website. Ron Sutherland has some great information on their webpage, and he's presented to the Sierra Club Capital Group recently about the critical hub that Umstead State Park and Lake Crabtree, that corridor is, and how there's an opportunity to make sure that the bobcat and other animals that need these larger expanses of land can travel through to Jordan Lake and up to Falls Lake. And really, we need to do as much as we can locally to preserve that land.
Another question that has come in is about blasting and neighborhood disturbances. Somebody is saying that the blasts that they're currently occurring at the existing quarry are enough to shake their house. I think they're saying about a mile away. Now, I live probably 2 miles from it. I don't hear it or feel it, but there are neighborhoods closer. What have you heard about that?
Yeah, so let me start on that. So we have a person who lives 2 miles away, and he feels every blast and hears every blast. We have, of course, the Dunns and the Beals. We have 2 residents right near the Oddfellows track on the other side of Crabtree Creek. And they both experience quite a bit of plaster and foundation cracks. In the historic buildings in the park, up to almost 2 miles away, the windows rattle at every blast. And before the blast, we, of course, have major sirens. Of course, all the time there's the backup beeps and a lot of noise. But on the blast criteria for the mines, they're based on industrial settings. So a quarry that is in the middle of an industrial setting, that's the blast rating. And for that same rating, according to the international studies, that would do damage for residents. And so one thing, it's incredibly unfair to have a negative in the Umstead State Park and in the residents to have a permit that allows a level of industrial damage. The levels that they're permitted are for steel reinforced industrial type buildings, and known to, at those limits, to do damage to residential and our historic buildings in Umstead State Park. Now, it's also known that the travel patterns are different. So, Gary, you may live 2 miles away and not feel it, but this other person on Reedy Creek Road feels every blast. But in Umstead, we can hear and feel it in the buildings. And, of course, those residents, things can shake off their shelves in some of these blasts.
I have a neighbor who works in an office park across I-40, and she says, they hear it every time the blast, they can feel it. And it's so much so that, when they're on teleconference calls, they have to explain to new clients and customers, oh yeah, that's just the quarry across the street blasting again. and that's across I-40. So some in the hundreds of feet, 500, probably 500-ish feet to 1,000 feet, about 1,000 feet from the closest edge of the pit. But the new pit that's proposed would be, it depends on what the buffers end up being, but somewhere on the order of 100 feet top of pit to the Dunn's residence. You talk about an impact, that would be huge. It's hard to imagine how their house would survive without major damage. And then right across I-40 is Town of Cary's sewage treatment plant. It's a large set of infrastructure quite close, again, to top of pit of the new pit.
Right, and then the specs are written not only for industrial, but they're written for 500 feet away.
Another question about the blasting is, has it had an impact on air quality?
I'll start on that a little bit. There's impacts from the blasting. There's fugitive dust emissions from the trucks that are carrying the aggregate out of the park or out of the exit, Wakestone's current exit. And there's also activity in the quarry as far as screening, crushing. All of those industrial activities generate emissions of PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is a critical criteria air pollutant that's known to cause health effects. So we know that there's emissions that are impacting Umstead State Park, and I think they will only get worse when they expand, if they were to be allowed to expand the quarry pit.
Okay, I'm seeing some questions that are going to lead us in a different direction, and I'll get there in just a moment. Before I do, and for those folks watching, I'm going to put up your map of some of the areas that we're talking about, and see where the existing quarry pit is, and to its northwest where the new pit would be. There's also some other territory that is involved nearby, the tract that is known as 286 East, which is right on the edge of the RDU current airport. And I guess that's it. That's and 286 West, some territory that's going to be developed by the airport authority. How are these involved in what you want to do? They're not where the quarry is going to be, but what do you want to do that has an effect on that territory? It's a jump ball.
Both those tracks are on the park's critical acquisition list for inclusion in the park.
Yeah. And I think that's the most, which basically, just to explain what that means for folks, the park maintains a critical acquisition list of properties that they deem as critical, that if they were ever had the opportunity that they would acquire for growth and, growth needs of the park. Umstead State Park usage was, I think the last year we have stats for it, it was up about 33 or 35% year over year. I mean, seeing crazy growth in visitorship. And we really, as a region, we really need to take every opportunity. This is once in a lifetime, maybe a handful of times in a lifetime, you might have the opportunity to expand this park. There's so much development in the area, but that's the reason for the focus on those two tracts of land, Gary, the Oddfellows tract, and that what you're referring to is the 286 East tract. It aligns with the park's vision and their critical acquisition list. It aligns with the investments that the local municipalities have made in greenways and greenway investments leading right to that corridor. Just to draw, we'll come back to that in a second. So, what hatched? This was maybe in 2016, when this group and coalition started forming. But the name of RDU Forest is what we'd originally given to that area, saying, hey, there's an amazing forest on this odd section of land that protrudes far away from the airport across a major recreation zone, across the East Coast Greenway and around the bottom of the park. And hey, it makes no sense that the airport owns this. Let's find a way to preserve this land and to get us to a place that's in line with the park's critical acquisition list. So that's what hatched the vision of RDU Forest as a multi-purpose use hiking and mountain biking trail, single track dirt trail system that combined with some of the lands in the western area of what is currently Umstead State Park to build a trail network there to meet the need, the growing demand and need for forested recreation in that area. And I think it's important to contrast that with what'll happen if we don't go down that path, right? I think we've seen two huge issues that draw a stark contrast, right? One is the quarry that we're talking about. The other is the fence plans that the airport announced, and it really shines a light on the again, I keep using this word, but just the stark contrast between it's a beautiful recreational corridor right now, and that Umstead Park district leading into Old Rudy Creek is just that. It's a recreation district. You put an 8-foot tall barbed wire topped chain link fence with, I believe, 20-foot wide swath of clearing on 10 on either side, if I remember correctly.
15 on each side.
15, oh, yeah.
Which 30, they don't even have. It's a power station spec fence.
Yeah. So, something, it just totally transforms that area and takes one of the main entrances to the park and how residents from Cary and Morrisville get in and access the park and will just totally change that experience. And it just makes no sense. And I think, I'll mention one more thing and I'll get us back on topic, but I think, or let you take up more questions, but if you look at kind of how we got here, right? Like what went wrong, right? Why are we at this late stage of a mining company that has secured a lease agreement to some land and is now petitioning DEQ or has applied to DEQ for a mining permit? How do we get this far? Like, why didn't it even stop before? And one of the flaws in this, and one of the things that went wrong, in my opinion, is that there was no proper zoning consideration. If this were to happen within the jurisdiction of Cary or Raleigh, it wouldn't happen, right? I mean, Cary, Raleigh, Apex, Durham, they wouldn't put a new pit right next to their biggest, most popular, their largest asset of a recreation area. They'd have the sense not to do that and not to rezone what was not already an industrial zone right next to a park. And that's effectively what's happening here. The airport authority, is, in our opinion, has just exercised some really poor judgment in saying, hey, we are our own zoning authority. And they literally, went through their process when they went into the airport layout plan and kind of rezoned this area as industrial / quarry with barely a discussion about it. That's a whole other, anyway, I won't go down that trap, but that was, it was a very underhanded way that it happened, right? They were very not transparent about it, not even to their board, not even to the airport authority board. There were several airport authority board members that walked out of the meeting. There was a meeting where they stamped approval on an airport layout plan, which was the first time that layout plan showed that area zoned as quarry / industrial. And in that meeting, there was a very quick, minimal discussion. Hey, board, approved the plan. Board, all thumbs up, unanimously approved it. Afterwards, there were several board members we talked to that did not even realize one of the largest impacts of that airport layout plan they had just approved was that they had flipped zoning to quarry and industrial. And again, I think when you kind of got to look at what went wrong and how did they get past that
It does not even show up in the minutes either, Dave.
Yeah. And so again, this is where I think when it comes to the political angle of this, of the counties and cities that rightfully own the land, this is where we're saying, hey, the process didn't work here. The airport authority didn't do a proper consideration of a rezoning of this. And that is all the more reason that the cities and counties who own the land need to assert their right and get involved.
When did that first happen? When did that first come out?
October of 2016 was this mysterious approval of the quarry. It does not even show up in the airport authority minutes. It did show up a little earlier. The public knew about it. By that time, we had 11,000 public comments. Now we have well over 22. The airport had a $4.3 million grant from the FAA to look at runway and terminal and also land use. And they promised to do alternative analysis on all of those. They did do alternative analysis on the runways and the terminals. They did no alternative analysis. They just, in fact, the consultant told us that she was told to accept the land use plan she was given, which was the quarry on the Oddfellows track, the destruction of the Lake Crabtree County Park, 147 acres between Lake Crabtree and I-40, which is the mountain bike trails now, would be gone to Office Park. And 286 and all that area next to Umstead State Park would be a parking lot. That's their great vision with no alternative analysis. Ah, yes. So this, I think, is the Regional Transportation Alliance. Is that not what that is? Yes.
Which RDU is a member?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I just realized I was on mute. I'll keep this real brief, but I think, Gene, that's a perfect segue into, when you think about like, where are the controls? Where are the proper controls here to catch this thing before it gets so out of whack and just bad judgment on the airport authority's part? So here, this is the Regional Transportation Alliance. This is an alliance of, the task force basically represents the, business leaders, a diverse group of business leaders who are dedicated to the success of our hometown international airport and our growing region.
Yeah, David, can you blow that up some? It's hard to read on screen right now.
Absolutely. Whoa, CSS styles
there we
not
go.
hanging with me. There we go. The Regional Transportation Alliance, is a consortium of, diverse group of business leaders. And they're basically looking at their priority is, hey, how can we ensure the success of, our RDU airport, but also balance that with our growing region. And this was significant. A lot of time and effort was put into their report, but I'll show you the longer, or this may be the shorter version of the report, but they were very clear in a couple of key things I just want to highlight. Is that large enough? Does that come across okay?
If you can blow it up some, it'll help. There you go.
All right. So basically, they're saying, the situation surrounding the airport land and adjacent Umstead Park has been a costly distraction, and that the airport should revisit their entire 2040 master plan given the reality of an adjacent beloved state park. They may not be a natural partner with the park, but they need to become one. And talk about, building regional goodwill. I think the blasting hasn't even started yet, right? Imagine if this mining permit gets approved. Imagine if the lawsuit fails. Let's hope that day doesn't come. But if no one stops this, can you imagine the Black Ivy Airport and our region is going to have, when they come in and they clear cut the trees, and then they spend months, if not a year, trucking overburden of dirt, the topsoil down Reedy Creek Road, right next to Carey's Black Creek Greenway and next to Lake Crabtree County Park. This is going to go on, that's going to go on for years, and 30 up to 35 years. And when they're blasting at the surface, it's while it's a bit subdued because it's 350, 400 feet down, the blasting is now. When that starts happening at the surface, when you read the reports from the 80s of the park rangers in Umstead State Park talking about just what a nuisance it was and how incompatible it is with the park, I just, as loud as the outcry is now, it was an election issue in the Raleigh municipal elections. It was front page on the News and Observer. Whoops, there we go. But front page on the N&O. It's made a lot of, garnered a lot of attention, and there hasn't even been any blasting yet. So, it's time for people in power to rethink what's right. This just stinks, and it's going to stink even worse if it ever happens.
Blemish for the region. It's a blemish for RDU International Airport. And also, Liz is wearing a shirt for the East Coast Greenway. This is the East Coast Greenway. This is the Maine to Florida, Florida to Maine route. It's also a major North Carolina route from the mountains to the coast. It is also a U.S. bike route. It is the connection between the Black Creek Greenway Trail and the American Tobacco Trail. It's the connection that goes to Umstead State Park, to the Art Museum, to the House Creek, to the Neuse River Trail, to Dix Park. It is the Greenway hub of the region. This is not an insignificant, out-of-the-way place. This is extraordinarily popular. Umstead State Park, Lake Crabtree, the connectivity, the town of Cary, Morrisville, Raleigh. It's a unique situation, so much so that EDSA, an international landscape firm, partnered with us with Susan Hatchell locally. And EDSA, who does Marriott's and facilities all over the world, including China, Europe, said there's no opportunity like this in the nation. But the quarry, of course, would destroy this opportunity. So we're offering an opportunity for the airport, for the community. We want to keep Lake Crabtree County Park. We do want to put single track trails in Umstead State Park in conjunction with the 286 and the Oddfellows track, and make a recreational destination, internationally known and connected regionally and U.S. connected.
Actually, I was going to ask for some more details on what alternative plans you have for that territory. We need to talk about the meeting, the June 23rd meeting, and what people can prepare and how they can work on that. But before we do that, let's talk about the alternatives that are possible for this territory. What could it become? What have you imagined?
Gil, you've got a business slant. You want to take that?
Well, we've looked at opportunities out there to more or less do a regional trail center there that would attract really people from all over. We've got hotel and meeting space nearby. That would just be a natural draw. A lot of ski resorts have picked up on mountain biking during their off season and determined that was a big draw. We could do much the same thing here, and parks are a very good neighbor for airports, much more so than residential areas and so on. So recreational use just seems a natural fit for this. It's unique topography. It's a beautiful wilderness tract of land is what it amounts to.
And just adding to that, yeah, I mean, I think our vision as Triangle Off-Road Cyclists is that it's a great opportunity to meet the very underserved need for single track mountain biking trails in that area. That's again at a hub of the Greenway network, a very central location, whether you're coming from Raleigh or Cary or Morrisville, and just serving not only the residents but the businesses around there. It's a very much an economic development issue, right? I mean, as an employer there, I'm several folks who are hiring managers at some of the tech firms up and down the Weston Park corridor and North Cary and West Raleigh and Morrisville areas. They'd love to have that as an asset to recruit folks. We're constantly competing with the likes of Denver and Austin and Portland and the Bay Area and the Boston area for tech talent, and it's a real difference maker, right? When when the jobs that drive our economy, the engine of our economy here in the Triangle are largely knowledge workers, largely desk jobs. I've been in that industry for more than I care to count. I don't know, 30-ish years, something like that, almost. And I've definitely seen a big realization and shift, right? It's everything from standing desks to taking breaks to getting outside and walking to, some of the tech firms in the Triangle now have what they call power lunches, where they give, they're happily give folks, a year and a half, an hour and a half for lunch and have shower facilities and encourage folks to get outside and be active. And it's a very strategic play from an economic development standpoint to have expanded recreation opportunities there. I think, one of the, for all the terrible economic and health impacts of the COVID pandemic, one thing that's shown a huge light on is the demand and for outdoor recreation. When you lock people in their houses all day, it's like, hey, I want to, let me out, let me get outside and recreate. I mean, our greenways have been more crowded than ever. Gyms
are closed.
Yeah.
Gyms are closed.
And sorry, I'm 3 degrees off topic here to your question, Gary. But yeah, I think to put it succinctly, our vision, the RDU Forest Coalition, Sierra Club, Umstead Coalition, and Triangle Off-Road Cyclists, and Bike Walk North Carolina, our vision is that this area becomes a mountain bike and hiking and running, multi-use single track trail system, and that it becomes part of Umstead State Park, especially the Oddfellows track. The 286 East track may be more of a lease opportunity than a buy. It depends on the dynamics there, but that we basically preserve the investment. Enable for the growth of the park and preserve the investment the municipalities have made in this recreation corridor. And then on the flip side, when you look at this from the airport's perspective of once you get through this, if that land is a recreation attraction rather than a nuisance, all the better, right? For this land along their eastern border that does have transportation access, the National Guard Drive corridor there over near Park and Ride 3, then all of a sudden that land has an amazing amenity literally out its back door, right? You've got a recreational trail center, and that just that makes it even better case. They've actually had trouble leasing some of that land where they lease the sheets. You may have noticed for I don't know, perhaps a decade. I don't know exactly, but it's been quite a few years that those other tracks over there, they've tried to get firms to lease them, and they haven't gotten much traction. So it definitely can be a real lasting asset for not only the region, but for the airport. So too many words, but that's our vision in a nutshell. And we have, if you go to stopRDUquarry.com, there's quite a large some diagrams and some copy and photos and land layout plans for what we envision the trail center becoming.
All right, I think we should talk now about the public hearing. And this is a page from the Umstead Coalition, all about that hearing. Easy to find, but we'll put the link on the Triangle Talk Show's website. The hearing is scheduled for June 23rd at 6 p.m. And I think I've heard that it could last quite a long time, maybe up until midnight. So be prepared for a while. Participants can join the meeting at 5:45. You need to register in advance, but not very much in advance, just by noon, I think is what they said. And I've got to look at the registration form. Put in your name, email address, organizational affiliation, your position on the issue, pro, against, or neutral, and submit. Pretty simple. What do we need to know more about about this event?
This is a public hearing to DEQ, North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, and it speaks to the permit application that the private company Wakestone has made. So the point of this public hearing is to whether or not DEQ will provide a permit for this new mine operation on our public property. And according to the North Carolina state law, written by mining companies, basically, they have to look at the reasons for denying a permit. So it's more efficient, and the only thing that DEQ can evaluate are reasons listed in the law. And they are such things as damage to neighboring houses or residents or structures or public buildings or public spaces by blasting, by noise, by water quality, groundwater, air quality and groundwater quality and surface water quality and quantity issues, adverse impacts to William B. Umstead State Park, and recreational and other public facilities. And air quality, Liz, is one of the reasons. So the focus that folks should do on this is to focus in on the environmental and health and recreational negative impacts from this quarry. That's what this public hearing is about. Other issues should be more appropriately addressed to the governor and the local government owners and the other local governments that are affected in this recreational corridor. But the impacts to recreation in Umstead State Park are huge here. Noise, dust, trucks, truck conflicts alone. We currently have that at Harrison Avenue entrance, and we would love that to end, right? So dust, water quality issues, you name it. Those are all part of what can be addressed in this public hearing.
And that specific regulation, it says that the operation will have a significantly adverse effect on the purposes of a publicly owned park, forest, or recreation area. That's pretty plain. And that was one of the that was the main criteria for the mineral regulators back in '81 for the initial denial of the permit on land that Wakestone itself owned.
Right. We don't believe there should have been that existing quarry should be there. It was overturned by the Mining Commission, which is a different process than they have today. But the Mining Commission is made up of mining companies. For example, the Mining Commission now has the owner of Wakestone as one of its members of its commission. So, and even then, they gave us a sunset clause and increased buffers, both of which the existing quarry is trying to take away.
And some of this has been done sort of subtly too, because in '81, the public staff found really no condition that would change their position on it. The Mining Commission at the time specified some mitigating conditions that they included on there with some buffers, and the main one being a sunset clause provision that said that that the mining will end at the end of 50 years, or I believe it was 5 or 10 years after mining ceases there, whichever is sooner. So we've been looking forward to the day when the mine was going to be closed. That all suddenly changed about 11 months before the airport lease was executed. That provision was in their original mining permit and survived 8 different modifications through the years. Many of those modifications changed those buffers a little bit. Some of the wording can be kind of subtle in there. It goes from an undisturbed buffer to an excavated buffer, some things like that. that are really significant. And the change they made to the sunset clause just rendered it useless. It made no sense anymore.
And those were all administrative changes without ever communicating with North Carolina State Parks. And now they're proposing a use that they could just decrease. It used to be the buffers were from the top of bank of Crabtree Creek. Now they magically want it to be to the center line of Crabtree Creek. Well, Crabtree Creek was quite wide, so that's a significant reduction in the buffers. And allowed to put a bridge, retaining walls, roads, sediment basins, deforestation, fences, you name it. And they're trying to get down to a whopping 10 feet of natural vegetative buffer between their quarry operation and William B. Umstead State Park and adjacent residents and the East Coast Greenway. I mean,
is that the existing quarry or the proposed new quarry?
Well, that was the new proposed quarry, the specs I just quoted, and they want to decrease the width in the existing quarry as well to the center line of Crabtree Creek instead of the top of bank, and going from undisturbed buffers to unexcavated buffers, which is everything I said was allowed in there. So they're trying to also take away the protections from the existing quarry that we had for Umstead State Park and Crabtree Creek and making them even almost meaningless in this new proposed quarry.
You would like as many people as you can get to appear at this meeting?
Yes, and then hopefully everybody will get a chance to speak. If not, and even so, you can follow up in writing up to July 3.
And you would want everybody who's speaking to have a cogent argument.
Yes, so we need to encourage. I think everybody should speak to the reasons they can deny the permit, which are the reasons we stated before about adverse effects on the environment and on our park and recreation, and to residents and public structures and buildings.
Is it a problem to have lots of people say essentially the same thing? Or is the pile-on effect worthwhile?
Well, there's so much to say. I think there's so much wrong with this permit. I think we can have 200 people speak and all say different things about the different aspects of the permit. They're just wildlife corridor and the noise and the dust and the air quality and the trucks and the impact to the park and the neighbors and the structures and the town of Cary. I mean, there's just so much to talk about.
So I'm looking at the Umstead Coalition page for this. On that page, I don't see a link to, I guess what I would call suggested language. If people are going to participate, suggested things to say. So maybe that was something good to put on that page.
I think we do have a list of things that can be used to deny the permit. But good suggestion. I think it's up there. We'll find it. Make it easier to find.
And when I'm in the middle of doing a show and I'm trying to read things like that, I miss things really badly. So.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. But if you can see up top in the URL bar here, it's on umsteadcoalition.org. But there's a page called Mining Permit, which is under the Stop RDU Quarry area. And again, we'll put a link to this in the show notes. But in that area, there are the specific reasons that the DEQ may deny a permit. But yeah, great point, Gary. We should make sure folks know that.
Okay. I think I'm close to being out of things to ask about. There've been a lot of comments that have been flowing back and forth, but most of them are, as typical of a chat room, they start their own show. So folks have done that. Not really much to bring up here, other than but attracted quite an audience. So I'm impressed with that.
I think it's worth, while we're talking about the fact that there's going to be a bridge, and in some versions of the proposals we've seen calling for a conveyor belt also across Crabtree Creek. I think it's really worth let's dive into that for just a minute and make sure folks understand what that means too, because it's not only about the deforestation and the blasting and the pit on the Oddfellows track, but also how they're going to transit all that aggregate and all the equipment back and forth. And as you know, sound carries quite far over water, and especially if it's a bit of a ravine, which is exactly what the topography is like there at the border of the Oddfellows Tract and Umstead State Park, right along Crabtree Creek. So you're going to have this, heavy industrial bridge, likely a really loud conveyor belt capable of carrying really heavy tonnage of aggregate and rock back over to the crushing plant on the existing property. And that noise is going to carry far into the park and down the corridor, Crabtree Creek, and right near, like Company Mill Trail and some of the most popular pedestrian trails in the park. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth understanding too. This goes beyond just the blasting in the pit.
Yes, and I think another point to make is that the Department of Air Quality has determined that they don't need to modify their existing air quality permit because they're going to be reusing some of the same equipment. But if you think about it, you're traveling those trucks over double the distance or triple the distance. And so the impact will be greater, and they're two receptors to people who are more vulnerable. You're exposing more people to those impacts. So the diesel exhaust emissions, the dust from the quarry, and another thing we haven't talked about yet is whether that dust has high content of silica, which could cause silicosis. So there's all kinds of impacts that we could be exposing the public to. So if you are a vulnerable citizen who has perhaps asthma or heart disease or any sort of health condition that might make you more vulnerable to these emissions that are coming from this industrial operation, your voice will be especially significant at this hearing. You go there to recreate, to become and keep healthy, and you're being exposed unknowingly to the emissions from the quarry operation.
And Liz, it may be worth you spending like another minute or two and just explain to folks, that when folks first hear emissions, they may think, oh yeah, so it's a couple of diesel trucks or some no. What you're talking about in particular is PM 2.5 particulate matter. Could you tell us a little more about that?
So PM 2.5 particulate matter are particles that are so small that they can get into your body and impact all of your organs. And so the way you can think about that is similar to what we're fighting with COVID. The virus is so small that you wouldn't necessarily know if you're being exposed to it, and it could be airborne, which is why they're asking us to wear masks now to prevent the spread of COVID. So if you could also think about it in terms of tobacco smoke. Sometimes in the olden days when we'd be at a restaurant, you'd be in a room and you could smell the tobacco smoke. You couldn't necessarily see it, but your body would have some sense that it was there. With PM 2.5 or with COVID, your body doesn't recognize there's a threat, but yet you could suffer from health effects. So I think it's just really important to know that all those emissions from the quarry trucks, from the traveling, so that when they do the logging trucks, I think all of us have been up and down the East Coast Greenway on that segment, and it's basically gravel, right? And so even with bikes, you can resuspend that dust and breathe some of that in. But if you're doing that for 35 years and getting exposed for that long, it's a much worse impact. So I can't remember where I was in the train of thought, but it's just real important to realize that even if you can't see the particulate matter, that it is there and it's being generated by the quarry operations. So we have to be cognizant of that. The other thing is that there are different standards for quarry trucks. So there's called Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. The more efficient trucks produce less diesel exhaust or emissions. That would be much more protective if the quarry would use those types of trucks. But if they're using the old trucks from the operation, we're getting the dirtiest equipment. There's really no clean construction standards in North Carolina that would require the quarry to use cleaner trucks. So that's another problem, is that you're exposing the worst type of non-road emissions to the state park users.
So what I'm hearing is that if you want to go hiking in Umstead Park, wear an N95 mask and you're okay.
Yes.
A question from the chat room, and one that I had a connected question to. The question in the chat room was if you know of anybody from the North Carolina Division of Parks and Rec is involved, or friends of the State Parks Group. And the question that I had was, how much can Umstead Park itself be involved in these issues? So let's combine those and see who can give you outside support from official channels.
So according to the law, the state parks was asked to make comments on the permit, and they did, and they're quite harsh. So the state parks official position is that there have been issues currently with the current quarry, and of grave concern about continued issues of noise, dust, water quality issues, environmental issues, truck conflicts, wildlife corridor. And so that is all in the official statement from North Carolina State Parks, Department of Natural Cultural Resources, with respect to this particular quarry application. Friends of State Park is also there. We are members, Umstead Coalition is a member of Friends of State Park, and they're very supportive in trying to reach out to the various friends groups, because this is an issue for all state parks in North Carolina. Just think of the horrible impact of our public lands having a private quarry on them, particularly next to a state park.
There's also a user survey for folks that use the East Coast Greenway through Umstead State Park that we're trying to encourage people to answer questions about how often they use the Greenway, what they use it for, and we'd like to present that information to DEQ at the public hearing so that it's clear who will be impacted. And I think there's a question about whether you're susceptible to asthma or health conditions. So we can use that information to help make the point that this is no place for a quarry.
Where does that user survey show up?
Well, I've posted it all along the Greenway corridor, trying to make sure that we get folks that are using the Greenway, but I think Caroline just posted a link, and maybe we could add it to the show notes. There.
Okay, yeah, I'll grab it from there and put it in the show notes. I'm sure that I've seen it as I go riding by, because I go up and down the greenways quite a bit, and I don't remember seeing it, but I'm sure I did. I think that's pretty much it. Let's do a review. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking to zoom out a little bit on that last question. I liked. Let me just go down that path a little more. So the question about, is the Division of Parks and Recreation involved, and is in state parks. If you think about where we are in the process now, right? As Gene said, state parks is very much obviously against the quarry and put some pretty firm words in writing with regard to the permit application of their reasons that they feel that it would definitely be damage to the park. But if you think about it, so that's one state agency. You also have the Division of Environmental Quality, who's overseeing the mining permit application process, and it may come to pass that those two are at odds, right? And they're both state agencies. So, when we get back to the question of what can folks do to help support the effort, in addition to voicing comments on at the mining permit public hearing, I think it's really important for people to reach out to the governor. The governor is ultimately the head of all these agencies involved, and I think he needs to hear loud and clear what a missed opportunity this would be if this becomes a quarry pit right on the border of the most valuable park asset we have in the whole triangle.
Right, and I would say that the agency that knows the best about what the adverse impacts to Umstead State Park and Recreation is State Parks. and DEQ mining knows about mining. So I don't believe that it's appropriate the way the system is set up that somehow DEQ mining should be determining what the adverse effects of Umstead State Park are. The Umstead State Park staff, the state staff have already said negative impacts. So that's who we should listen to. And on that grounds, this permit should be denied. Also, you wonder, you saw from that video, time and time again, the amazing amount of white polluted water leaving the site. Well, they're not fined because that's all policed, shall we say, by the same folks with inside mining. So I would say that we should listen clearly to what State Parks has to say with respect to the negative impacts on our state parks. And yes, thank you. And to have that, so Wakestone says they've never had any violations. Well, that's Crabtree Creek. And that white plume of that heavy sediment will stay unique all the way for a mile and a half down to way past the Company Mill Dam along the Company Mill Trail in Umstead State Park. And so why is that not a violation in those many that we've reported? It's because it's being enforced or not, or it's got an exception for they can do that because they're a mine operation. So, and it's being overseen by the same people who are determining whether or not there should be a permit allocated. So that's why we need the independence of the governor and state parks to be listened to and the public.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yeah. And if this does continue down, the path of the permit process could very much be that, it's that there are accommodations. What's the right word, Gene? I'm forgetting the
mitigations.
Thank you, Liz. The environmental scientist in our, you can tell that's not my field. But yeah, I mean, what I think what also is very important to understand, right, is one path this could go down is that that DEQ says, oh, well, Wakestone, they're good guys. They're offering all these mitigations of increased buffers, and they're going to do this, and they're good neighbors to the park. They've never had any violations. I think people have to understand that there is no mitigation that can make this not a negative impact to the park. There is no way you dig a mining pit and blast for 30 years literally on the border of the park without damaging that park, without damaging the safety and utility of that park. So I think it's important that the message be loud and clear, not only to DEQ, but to the governor, that there is no acceptable mitigation under which this permit can be approved. And, even if the mitigation starts sounding reasonable, hey, maybe it's not that bad, remember what's happening right now and in the past months with the current mining operation in the Triangle Quarry with their current pit is that, with a underhanded, secretive, backdoor communication directly between Wakestone and DEQ with no public input and no oversight by higher ups within the agency, decided to just flip a word. And all of a sudden, that sunset clause, that promise that Wakestone made to the community remember, their original permit for the Triangle Quarry back in 1981 for the existing quarry, that was denied. And one of the mitigations, one of the ways that they convinced people to let them have that quarry is under that promise that there was this sunset clause and it was going to time out. And then that was going to be an opportunity for the park to expand, with the forethought here to say, hey, this park's going to need to be bigger. Sure, maybe the region needs, this is before the other quarries were right there. Maybe the Martin Marietta and the Hanson Quarry. Maybe the region really does need this aggregate to fuel the growth back in the early days of North Cary and RTP up there. But to get back to the point I'm making here that I think is critical is that it's just not acceptable that this permit be approved with any mitigating factors, because the process is set up such that they can come right back and flip those and strip those mitigating factors right away. And, Wakestone likes to say, hey, we're a great neighbor of the park. We're good people. Well, do the honorable thing and don't flip your sunset clause. You are breaking the promise you made.
Right, and they had 250-foot undisturbed buffers between the park and 100, 150 closer to along Crabtree Creek top of bank. Now on the existing site, they want to get rid of those undisturbed buffers and substantially decrease the buffers along Crabtree Creek and allow all sorts of other non-forested, clear cut. And on the Oddfellow site, they want a whopping 10 feet of buffers. I mean, they're not asking anything, and the site's so small that I don't think there's much mitigation they could do effectively. And then, will they renege as they did in the current site?
All right, now I'll go back to Dave's point too. How did we get here? How did we get to this point? And the process has been really shady. I'll say that. We've worked on to try to change the map since it originally came out and said quarry, industrial. We weren't getting any traction with that, and offers were made. I've been doing public contracting for 40 years, and I've never seen a solicitation so narrowly put together so that only Wakestone could meet the criteria. It couldn't be, no one else could. And even during the meeting where they approved the agreement, the only speaker was the attorney for Wakestone. And it was only a few minutes long. And they approved it, and that was it. And we had 48 hours notice that the meeting was going to be called. Last November, they came up with, now we're going to put this fence up. We need this to keep out trespassers, and we're going to include the entire Oddfellows track. Now, keep in mind, airports enjoy a little bit of a break on Neuse River buffer regulations that's not available to anyone else. So they're able to do a little more out there to really help out a private company enrich itself at the expense of the public, and that's a real problem for me.
And the airport authority actually turned down the lease offer, and then for 18 months it was silent. So something happened behind the scenes, and all of a sudden, with 40, they denied. They turned down the offer in a public in their board meeting. 18 months of silence, 48 hours of notice, with a 4-minute and 17-second meeting. They passed this really weird mineral lease. It doesn't have any protections that the airport normally has for their leases, for even their sandwich shops in the terminal. It doesn't pass any smell test for a public entity.
And that's available too on the website. I'd encourage you. It's not that long. The meat of it's only about 12 pages. But if you look at that, you'll wonder who put this together.
Yeah, you've got a really good frequently asked questions segment on the Umstead Coalition website. This question from the chat room: shouldn't representatives from the 4 towns that will be at the that are involved, shouldn't they be at the permit hearing as well? Someone from the town zoning departments. Do you know if the towns are getting involved? Raleigh, Cary, Durham.
So DEQ Mining is running the public hearing, and they're the ones who issue mining permits for the state. And it's a virtual call-in, and of course, the local governments could call in just as a somebody offering comments, but they're not being asked by DEQ to participate, which is an omission in I agree with the.
So they should.
I think they should, but DEQ is not doing that.
But Gene, it's why? I mean, it's not like their name's on the deed, right? I mean, they don't have an interest in the outcome of this, do they?
DEQ doesn't, but the 4 local governments' name is on the deed.
My point is, yes, it's been absolutely the 4 Raleigh, Durham County, and Wake County. I think absolutely should put a voice in with the public hearing. But in addition to that, yes, I mean, Morrisville Town Council has been receptive to some of our comments. I believe Cary Town Council has too, or my perception is some of them have been. Unfortunately, they have yet to put out an official statement or proclamation, but I would encourage residents of those, of either Morrisville or Cary, let your voice be heard and see if you can convince them to put in an official proclamation or announcement or word or statement to DEQ.
I think the most important thing for them to state is that the quarry is incompatible land use with their land use planning plans. Yeah. They have comprehensive land use plans for every town, and this is in conflict with those plans. So Cary has put a lot of effort into developing high density right near the entrances to the state park. Same with, I think if you look at the census tracts all around Umstead State Park, those are getting to be higher density. So you're putting more people closer to the park. You're going to have more impacts to those people that live there. And just not having that cross-jurisdictional consultation was a flaw in the process that RDU Airport Authority is responsible for. So I wish the local governments would step up and say, why were we not consulted?
And now the city of Raleigh did pass a statement that I don't have in front of me, but it was on the flavor of, we do not approve, we are not in favor, I think is what it said, of the proposed quarry. And the RDU Airport Authority should have asked us, the city of Raleigh, before moving forward. And that is a statement put out by the city of Raleigh last fall.
And I think Wake County made a similar statement that they were opposed.
Yes, Wake County passed a resolution saying that they supported the Conservation Fund offer to protect this property, and here it is. And that was passed unanimously by the Wake County Commissioners. So why did the Airport Authority move forward in opposition to the desires of two of their owners the deeded owners of this property?
Yeah. And just that highlighted portion of the, beyond all the whereases, basically they're saying, we want the airport to reconsider the conservation. This happened right after the airport rejected the conservation offer to conserve the land. So yeah, I mean, that's it's important. Unfortunately, some of the folks involved with this, both look at campaign contributions. I think I should leave it at that.
How much authority, how much oversight do these 4 government entities have over the Airport Authority? I mean, in theory, they run it, but what can they do?
Well, communication is big here, and they can communicate with their appointed board members. And of course, we believe in this case, the Airport Authority overstepped their authority.
Okay.
Yeah. Each of those governmental agencies appoint 2 members to the Airport Authority. And
they're, I believe, 2-year terms, right, Gil?
I think so, but something that's like not that. Necessarily adhered to.
Right.
Some people have been on there for a lot longer.
So they should be leaning on their appointed representatives there.
You would hope so, and there's one person on the Airport Authority board who serves on both. So there's a very clear conflict of interest between, he serves on the Raleigh City Council and he's also on the Airport Authority board. He's also the chair of the Airport Authority board when this plan was originally hatched, and that meeting that we talked about where it kind of got, on the down low, put through the zoning was changed to industrial quarry in the very early days of when they changed the airport layout plan in the very early days of this process. It's a clear conflict of interest. And I think that, some of the some of the peers of that gentleman on the Raleigh City Council were very vocal about it, and it became a big election issue. Unfortunately, Wakestone has deep pockets and a lot of connections, and it's again. I'll take this back to it is very much, if you care about this issue and you have not yet, and you live in Wake County or Raleigh, and you have not yet, or Durham, and you have not yet talked to your county commissioners or city councilors, hey, you're probably, a lot of you are sitting around working from home on one of your breaks, getting up from the desk, give them a call. So a YouTube chat room comment is saying, call it like it is, Dave. Give it a personal touch. Yeah. Backroom old boys network shenanigans. It's I'll just say, the more I have gotten involved with this over the years, the more it just makes you sick to watch the money trail and watch the buddy. Hey, yeah, we're all in this construction business, so let's be good to each other. And it just, there's access that some of these folks have to the decision makers that is just not right. It clouds the councils and commissions and mayors' judgments on what their job and what their alliance and allegiance should really be to whom it should be to.
This is public land, and we're offering a solution that would be financially and publicly and long-term and better relations for the airport and the community. And we believe that the quarry is just the opposite. It's a detriment to the airport, short-term and long-term. It's a detriment to the community. It's a detriment to the owners that own this property. It's just a bad thing all around. And so for a couple people to get a lot of money and the public to get very little money, it's just a tragedy, devastation to our public lands.
Somebody in the chat room is asking if people can bring signed petitions to this hearing on the 23rd. It's a virtual hearing. There'd be no place to bring signed petitions. I'm not sure how they would forward them.
That's something we had asked DEQ to do, was to wait until after the COVID restrictions had been removed so that we could attend a public hearing. I mean, I think your comment about you didn't see the trail user survey, they're kind of tacked up in a small area. You could easily miss if you're whizzing by on your bike. But I can't stand out there on the trail and risk my health to hand out trail user surveys to people. If we would wait until we can properly inform all the people who will be impacted, that would be much better. I think they should also be posting signs all along that corridor saying this is a public hearing opportunity for the public to make a statement, and they're not doing that. So,
in fact, Liz, I think you asked the airport and DEQ if they would put signs out like you would for any rezoning or any public notice or major land use change and they all refuse to do that. So they're refusing to put any effective public notice out. So, that you would have standard from any similar thing from any of the local owners.
It goes back to the authority. So they're a municipal corporation. They have authority to do zoning, to do eminent domain, to, do development, and yet they have no responsibility. They actually do have a responsibility, but no one's holding them to that responsibility. If you look up, the municipal corporation is pretty much equivalent to a city. So if they're rezoning, they should be having a zoning adjustment board so that if someone didn't like or wanted to protest that zoning change, there would be an opportunity for a public hearing. So I think, we as a state need to look at the authority that RDU Airport Authority has been given and say, are they doing their job? Are they meeting their public responsibility as a municipal corporation?
So as we wrap up here, because we're approaching 2 hours, can we do a quick wrap up of the action items that individuals can take? We've got the meeting on the 23rd, and you have talked about just communicating with your representatives, with government officials. But let's make some bullet points about what people should actually be able to do if they feel strongly about this.
I think one of the ones that, and Dave mentioned, is reaching out to the governor. He oversees these departments. I know he's got his hands full right now, but this is an important issue that that there is a lot at stake with this, and that's really one area that could be most effective.
Right. We want a fair hearing. And if it's run by DEQ and it's evaluated by DEQ mining, and they shove off public comments and NC State Parks comments, who are the professionals who know what the real damages are, that's not fair. So we're hoping at least, a hearing officer that's not worked for mining. Typically, they'll select a hearing officer that's actually worked for mining. So it's very circular. We need to get above that and listen to what State Parks has to say. This is unique because of its impact to the state park and recreational area. And the governor can help with that. And your local government should be crying about this tragedy to our land.
So once again, there are 4 governmental entities involved: Wake County, so your county commissioners; Durham County. I'm not sure what they've got county commissioners or how their organization is.
I do.
City of Raleigh, so city council, and City of Durham. And again, I'm not familiar what their organization is. And those are the 4 entities that control the RDU Airport Authority. And so it would seem like reaching out to those, whichever locale you're in, reaching out to your representatives in those 3 bodies is the most immediate connection that you could make.
That's right. And on stoprduquarry.com, you'll see a little tab of what you can do. It'll have the emails for your elected officials, the governor, yard sign requests, GoFundMe to help the effort. You can see a few of those yard signs behind me. You want one of those in your yard, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think this is a bit more of a remote possibility. But I mean, if anyone's listening and they're in a position of leadership at one of the local companies, that you probably have a pretty good idea, right? That this is important from a quality of life, and especially if you're anywhere near North Cary, Southwest Raleigh, West Raleigh, South Raleigh, Morrisville, RTP. I mean, that's a lot of the employment hub of the triangle right there, and especially for folks that are, if you're in a leadership position at those companies, let the governor know that you care about this. Let the town council of Cary or Morrisville know. Let Mike Landguth, the president of the airport, know. It's not necessarily just the masses of citizens, but I think just like the RTA task force, when they hear from the business community, whoa, this is not cool, right? This is, you should rethink this. I think that matters. So anyway, just to add that in.
Good point.
All right, we got our marching orders.
And I suspect that the airport wishes that they could turn back the clock and undo this tragedy.
So communicating with the airport authority, I'm not sure how you do that, but there must be a way.
You can, but I think at this point, the DEQ mining permit and the local government speaking out is probably where we're currently at in this process.
Yeah.
Right, and the lease agreement that RDU signed prevents them from in any way obstructing things.
Yep.
So they're almost out of it now.
And I suspect they're rooting for us. I think they saw the Regional Transportation Alliance recommendation, and I think they realize the business community is opposed to this.
Well, they've done terrible damage to their brand, and unnecessarily. And that's what makes it hard to comprehend.
Right. And everyone on this podcast and most of the people looking, we do want a thriving airport. And we're offering such. We're offering financially better, image better, a community better. This is a short-sighted thing that doesn't bring very much income to the airport and just devastating and detrimental to our community.
So as people have been suggesting in the chat room, it's political, backroom political. And, well, counting on our area news organizations, News and Observer, Durham Herald, TV stations to keep a close eye on this. And, of course, I'm sure you guys are watching like a fox now.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
Nothing will be getting value. All right. If you got a significant development, come back here, and we'll be glad to do more Triangle Talk Show about it. And thank you very much for coming on the program. Let me review who we've got here. Dr. Gene Spooner is the Umstead Coalition Chair. Gil Johnson is an Umstead Coalition Board member. Liz Adams, researcher for the it's covered up on my screen, a research associate for the UNC Institute for the Environment. So bringing science to the Triangle Talk Show. I don't know if we like science here. And David Anderson, Triangle Off-Road Cyclists. Thank all you guys for your participation in this program. This has been episode 96, Trees and Trails, not politics, Trees and Trails. Stop RDU Quarry, June 9th, 2020. And let's see. I'm Gary Pierce. I'm still a single flake of snow, apparently. Left over from the last show. I always forget to change my own designation. And that is it for this episode of the Triangle Talk Show. For those of you that are sticking around and have discovered this show, thanks to all the publicity that you guys at Umstead Coalition have done. Well, thanks for watching. We do this show at least once a week and sometimes a little bit more. So check out our website, triangletalkshow.com, our YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe to the Triangle Talk Show on YouTube till we get over 100 people, and then you can go away. Thank you very much. And that will be it for this program. Thank you, guys. Over.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for hosting us, Gary.
Glad to do it.